Hello, Arkansas. Hello, America. Hello, world. I'm Happy Caldwell, and I want to thank you for joining me for today's edition of Arkansas Alive. And thank you for watching VTN, the Victory Television Network. We appreciate all of our viewers and our partners. Our topic this week is faithfulness. It means more than what we have normally thought about. I think you will get really blessed when you see what all faithfulness includes. Stay tuned. Arkansas Live starts right now. Now, as I closed out yesterday, I told you, according to Paul Harvey, I would give you the rest of the story today. So let's pick up Matthew 25, and let's go back to verse 24. And I was in the middle of my hog farmer's story. If you didn't hear that, you can go online and pull up Arkansas Alive by date, and you can rewatch yesterday's Arkansas Alive material. The hog farmer wanted us to pray for his hogs, wanted us to pray for his pigs so he could prosper. He'd gotten a hold of the word of faith, and he wanted to, multiply his business and prosper. That's all part of God's will for his children, is to prosper and be in health. Well, we walked into his house after we'd prayed for his hogs, and the floor was covered, and the chairs, the cushions on the chairs were covered with, all I can describe it is as some kind of, I don't want to use a repulsive term, but it was all covered with crud. It just looked like the hogs had been in the house. Now, they had not been, and we didn't know. I'm just using that as an expression. Everything in the house was dirty. The kitchen was dirty. The chairs, you wouldn't want to sit in the chairs. They offered us a meal or a coffee or whatever. We said, no, thank you. We got to go back to church services. And what it amounted to, in the rest of the story and the completion of that story, is the man, and I have to include his wife and his kids. I met them, but I didn't know them, but he's the head of the house. He had never been faithful in the small things. He had never been faithful in the little things, like vacuuming the floor, cleaning off the chairs, washing the dishes. I imagine the bathrooms looked the same. It was filth personified. And I guess since he dealt mostly with hogs and slopping the hogs in the mud and so forth, I guess he never really had any change of identification when he went from the hog pen to the house. And I thought to myself, we can pray over those hogs all day long, but he's not going to see any increase, any abundance, unless he first is faithful in the little things, which means the house, the kitchen, the chairs, the dining room. Unless he cleans his house, he's not going to experience any abundance because he's not being faithful, which that is the least. Now, point well taken. Let me go on reading. Matthew 25 and verse 23. The Lord said, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Let me stop there right now and go back to why this man won't ever prosper or see abundance, because he's not faithful in the small things. Let me ask you a question. Now, I don't know you. You don't know me. But if I were to come to your house and I would see the furniture broken down, I'd see writing on the walls. I had a neighbor one time. I lived in a neighborhood where the family was a well-to-do family. In fact, he was a part of an administration team at one of the major hospitals here in town. And we liked them, but they had two little boys that were incorrigible, untamable. And my son went over to their house one day and went into their house. He said, Daddy, you wouldn't have believed it. He said there was feces all over the wall. He said those boys ran rampant. They carried a hose from outside into the house one day with water coming out of it. He said it was unbelievable, the shape of that house. Well, what's the shape of your house? What does your garage look like? If we were to drive in front of your house, would you want to pull the garage door down so we couldn't see inside? What does the attic in your house look like? What does your clothes closet look like? What do you look like? I get tickled at some of these preachers, and they have dumbed down their dress code. They have on tennis shoes, blue jeans, and some of them are blue jeans with holes in them, which they're supposed to cost more. Why I don't get that. But and they look like they just walked off of the basketball court or out of a fishing boat, and they're pastoring the church, or they're youth minister, or they're functioning in some kind of ministerial authority, and they look like homeless people. In fact, some of the homeless people you see on the street today look better than some of our preachers. And you wonder why they're not growing, why the church is not growing, why people aren't being edified. Because there's no faithfulness to God. I wanted to tell this one young preacher, he had on his tennis shoes and his blue jeans and his shirt tail hanging out, and you could see his undershirt underneath hanging out the bottom, and unshaven, and just looked like he crawled out of bed. I wanted to say, you're supposed to look like you honor God. You're supposed to look like the priests that used to serve in the temple of God. One young minister asked Keith Moore. Keith and I were doing a ministerial conference up in Tennessee a few years ago for Faith Christian Fellowship, all the ministers that were, and we were teaching on these things, and this young man walked out and said, I don't think God cares what we look like. And Keith said, he used to. He always has. Look at the priests. The priests had certain garments that they had to wear. It's but that's all ritual. That was all Old Testament, and God doesn't care about that anymore. Oh, yeah? Look over in Revelation, what all of the saints that are before the throne worshiping God, it says they're dressed in fine linen. Have you ever seen a fine linen garment? It's gorgeous. It's pristine. God does care what you look like. You're just telling me when you're sloppy, you're just telling me that's the way you feel about God. That's how you worship God. That's your relationship with God. It's sloppy. You've dumbed yourself down because you think that you are identifying with the young people or with the same crowd. How many sloppy people do you want in your church? Everything's relative. And your relationship with God is going to show up in your garage, your attic, your living room, and the clothes that you wear. Now that I've stepped all over your toes, you're going to have to repent and ask God to forgive you where that's concerned, or forgive you for being angry at me. But here is the end of the story. In verse 23, it said, enter into the joy of the Lord. I will make you ruler over many things. Then he which had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you, that you were a hard man. Well, that tells me right there he didn't know what he was talking about. You were a hard man, reaping where you've not sown, and gathering where you've not strewn. That's impossible. You can't reap where you haven't sown. Somebody's got to sow. We tell our partners, we have partner specials. We just had one, and in our appeal to our viewers to receive partners, we tell people, if you're watching VTN right now and you're not a partner, the reason you're able to watch VTN is because somebody else is giving to VTN to keep it on the air. You're not going to reap because you haven't sown, but they're going to reap because they have sown. And they're going to get a well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord. And they're going to get more than that. And we'll find out this week how much more. So he went to the man that he'd given 1 talent. I'm still reading in Matthew 25:24. And he said, I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathering where you have not strewn. I was afraid. Now that's the reason right there. Underline that. I was afraid. That was the whole purpose. He lied about the other. This was the real excuse. I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the earth, and there you have, that is thine. And listen to what the Lord said to him. The Lord said of that servant, you slothful and wicked servant. You knew that I reaped where I did not sow, and gathered where I have not strawed. You should have, if you really thought that, which he didn't, you should have at least put my money to the exchanger in the bank. Then at my coming, I would have received my own with usury, with interest. And he told that young man that had the 1 talent, he said, if you didn't believe in everything that these others believe, you should have at least put my money in the bank and let it draw interest until I came back. So here's what the Lord of those servants did. Verse 29, for everyone that shall be given, he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. So if you try to argue the point that God doesn't care about prosperity or doesn't care about your abundance, then you're fighting against the Word of God. He does care. He encouraged those young men to take what he gave them and invest them and make more, or at least put it in the bank and draw interest off of it. If you can't be faithful in the little things, why would you be faithful in the big things? Now go over to Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 20. Proverbs 28 and verse 20. Let me find that place. I had it in my marker in the wrong place. Proverbs 28, and let's look at verse 20. A faithful man shall abound with blessings. Whew. But he who hasteth to be rich shall not be innocent. In other words, if you're striving after, you want to make it, you want to become rich, and all for the wrong reasons, you just want to be rich. You want to drive the best, live the best, look the best. You want to be a hot shot. You want to be rich. So you're working to become rich. You're not doing what the Bible says. The Bible doesn't tell you to work to become rich. It tells you in Matthew 6:33 to seek the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will He add to you. So you're not serving or seeking riches, you're seeking and serving God. And God will give you everything that you desire. But you've got to make sure your heart is correct, your heart is right. So again, let me read you the definition of faithful, and then we're going to go over to Luke 19. And we're going to see Luke's account of the parable of the stewards. Let's go over to Luke 19. Now listen, write this down if you are taking notes. To be faithful, it says a faithful man will abound with blessings. A faithful man, faithful in that which you've been given, faithful in the small things. Here it is, steadfast loyalty. Steadfast loyalty, trustworthy, true to your word. We can expand on these later. They're powerful. Steadfast love, commitment, and patience. Wow. I'll tell you another personal story. I mentioned the 4 ministers that we used to minister together a lot. me, Buddy Harrison, Jerry Savelli, and Dufresne. And Jerry and I served in a ministerial fellowship. I was the president of it for 12 years, and he was the vice president. He chose, now I know Jerry well enough, and I knew then. Jerry, he chose to be vice president. He didn't want to be president. He allowed me to be president. He put himself in a position to serve me, to help me as president of this fellowship. Now, these are ministers from all over the world. And after 12 years, I felt like my time was up. But Jerry came to Buddy and I. Buddy started the fellowship. He was the president for the first 12 years, and I was the president the second 12 years. And he came to us and said, I feel like that it's time for me to resign. Now, I was still president. I felt like I was going to resign eventually, but not at that time, and let somebody else take it. And Jerry said, I feel like I'm going to resign. And Buddy looked at Jerry. Now, you got to understand, we had a covenant relationship that very few people have today. I guess the closest thing that you could compare it to would be the covenant relationship that Billy Graham had with George Beverly Shea and Cliff Barris. They had a covenant relationship for 60, 70 years. And when Jerry said, I'm going to resign, Buddy said, you can't resign. And Jerry said, why not? He said, because of your covenant relationship with Happy. He said, you cannot resign until he does. Whoa. I think it kind of shocked Jerry, but Jerry was such a man of honor, such a faithful man. He stayed in that vice president situation, in the vice president office, until I resigned. When I resigned as president, he resigned at the same time. What was he? He was loyal, not only to God and to the position, but to me. He was trustworthy. He was true to his word. He had a steadfast love. He was committed, and he had patience. Now, once you get that definition of faithfulness, hold on to it, because it makes a difference. It matters whether you have faithfulness or not, whether you are faithful or not. Did you know, and I'm going to show you in the scriptures, your rewards that you will receive from Jesus at the judgment seat of Christ, when he passes out all the rewards due to you as a child of God at the judgment seat of Christ, is all based on your faithfulness. And that's why it said, these things will all be proven with fire, and if they burn up, you'll have no rewards. God rewards faithfulness. Now, let's go back over to Luke 19. Here's another gospel account of the faithfulness of the stewards. In Proverbs 19, and let's look at verse 15. It came to pass that when Jesus, or when he, the master, had returned, it says in verse 13, a nobleman went to a far country. He had 10 servants, and he delivered unto them 10 pounds and said unto them, occupy till I come. And then down in verse 15, it came to pass that when he had returned, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him, and to whom he had given the money, or the marginal reference says silver, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Now remember, according to Jesus in Matthew 24 and 5, according to Luke, as it were in the days of Noah, as it were in the days of Lot, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Jesus coming, his return, his rapture is upon us. It's imminent, anytime. And then the judgment seat of Christ. And we're going to be rewarded for what we've done in the body. So faithfulness is very important. So the nobleman came to see who had done well with what they had been given. The first came and saying, Lord, you gave me 10 pounds. Thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. And he said, well done, good and faithful servant, because you've been faithful in a very little. You now will have authority over 10 cities. He's going to be over 10 cities. Now, as I have meditated on that, that is almost unimaginable. That's scary. It's to know that if you are faithful in what you have been given, if you're faithful in the little, he said you're going to get authority over 10 cities. And I don't want to say this wrongly or negatively, but I don't know if I want that kind of responsibility over 10 cities. And as they were writing this, that could have been 10 cities that John wrote about in the book of Revelation. It could have been Ephesus, Thyatira, Pergamum. It could have been Rome. 10 cities? How'd you like to be given authority over 10 cities? Let's just put it back down to the 21st century. 10 cities. How'd you like to be given authority over New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Honolulu? How'd you like to be given? Have you ever been to any of those cities? They're a nightmare. They're a mess. It's hard to believe anybody has the ability to govern 10 cities. But that's what he said he would give those that were faithful in the least. And remember, according to Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, he only gives you authority where he knows that you have the ability. He gives it to you according to your ability. That's why he gives some pastors churches with 1,000 members, some churches with 20 members. It's according to your ability. He knows you can manage it. And listen, don't think it's demeaning. If you're a pastor over a small church and you've got 25, 30, 40, 50 people, 100 people, 30, 300 people, that's the average church in America. Don't think that means that God thinks that you're less qualified than the man that's pastoring a church of 100,000 people. No. The guy, you think about it, the guy with 100,000 people, he probably couldn't hack it with a small church of 300 people. You don't think about it that way, do you? You think about, oh, he's got so many more people, he has more talent than I do. Not necessarily. He probably could. I've analyzed this over the years, and I teach the heart of a pastor at Andrew Wommack's Bible College in Colorado Springs. He asked me to teach the third-year ministry students about pastoring. So I do every year. And I even wrote a book about it called The Heart of a Pastor. And I have watched pastors over the years. And it might seem like sometimes I'm kind of hard on them because I tell them it's your responsibility what goes on in your church, and what your church does goes on in the city that you're in. You're the pace setter. You're the leader. And you have to look sharp, be sharp, talk sharp. And it's the pastor's responsibility. God puts the total responsibility of the outcome of that church on the pastor. He's the under shepherd. He's the person that God sets in there to be a pastor of the people. And I've seen people try to pastor, but they don't have a shepherd's heart. I had one evangelist who was a great evangelist. Boy, he could preach heaven high and hell hot, but he quit traveling and started a church. This was many years ago. So I asked him, I said, why did you do that? He said, I just got tired of traveling. I'm just going slow down and be a pastor. I wanted to tell him, I said, well, you don't have much understanding about being a pastor. There's no slow down to it. I mean, it's 24/7. And his church failed. It didn't do anything. Why? He wasn't called. He just chose that because he thought it was going to be easier. But there are pastors, they don't have a heart. And I'm not judging pastors, but I can see it. They don't have a heart for the people. They don't have a sincere love of God, a heart for those people's souls. Because Hebrews says you're supposed to watch for the souls of the people. To a lot of pastors, they're just heads in a pew, body in a pew, and they're there for the pastor to preach to and to derive enumeration from, and that's. And the Bible talks about pastors like that. It says they feed on the flock. They don't feed the flock. They feed on the flock. And so I've seen them, pastors that are not successful in pastoring is because they don't have a heart for the people. And the people know when they are loved. They know when they are honored and prayed for and served. And they know when they're just a number. They know when you don't really care about them. They notice that. So you have to have a heart for what you're doing. And we're about to run out of time for today. So when Jesus was talking to these, and he said, you've been faithful in a very little, I give you authority over 10 cities. Wow. The second came, said, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said, likewise to him, be you over 5 cities. And the other one came, said, behold, here's your pound, which I've laid up for you in a napkin. I feared you, because you are an austere man. You take up where you lay down not, you reap where you did not sow. And he said, out of your own mouth will I judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was a hard man, taking up what I had not laid down, and reaping what then you should have given my money to the bank, that at my coming I might have required my own with usury. God's not against prosperity. He's for abundance. Now, join me tomorrow. We're going to continue with faithfulness. Remember, Jesus is Lord over Arkansas, and where you're watching, too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at Post Office Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com. Remember to follow VTN on Facebook at VTN Your Arkansas Christian Connection, and follow Happy Caldwell on X at Happy_Caldwell. VTN is on Roku. Search VTN in the channel store and add us to your lineup. Today's episode is available to watch on demand at VTNTV.com and click Watch. You can also watch VTN via live stream at VTNTV.com.